thank you for having me here tonight. I apologize for being late. I'm always amazed in the wintertime how many non-Montanans live in Missoula. Like, this is just snow. We saw it last year, and it's going to be here next year. And, you know, if you can't stop, just ram into the pole. I mean, everything's got a solution, right? So Laura asked, actually, we were communicating, man, the middle of last year of when a time would be for us to come and to talk with you about what we do with the Lifeguard Group and maybe give you some understanding and maybe some resource and equip you just a little bit. So the Lifeguard Group is a group that works to fight human trafficking here in the United States and internationally. And why is it important for us to be in front of foster parents? Well, right now we know of all the vulnerable groups. So what's the number one vulnerable group that you have heard about on TV and the newspaper?
Native Americans.
About being, what's that?
Native Americans.
Native Americans, right? And that is an absolute correct assessment that Native Americans are vulnerable to human trafficking. Here is our problem, and this is why I don't like us to compartmentalize people, is because the issue or what we are facing with the Native American population, especially from ages about 8 till 15, is nothing new. It's nothing that has just popped up in the last 2 years or 5 years, but it's just all of a sudden we're beginning to talk about it. And I think that's something that's even more important than just talking about that, but we need to talk about the fact of why were we not talking about this 15 years ago and 20 years ago. And we are in the same place with another people group, and that's called foster kids. And I want to tell you, across the United States right now, the number one, there is no group even close, the number one most vulnerable group, you talk to law enforcement, resource workers, CPS, they will tell you the number one vulnerable group are those that are in foster care. And so when Laura was talking to me about sharing some things with you, I did not want to come in here and bring some sort of fear and wonder of different things, but at the same time bring some facts to you of what we have learned, whether it's by speaking with victims, speaking with survivors, speaking with those that work with victims even more so than we do in different parts of the world. And I think first of all what we need to understand is that human trafficking, we like to think that it's not in Montana. And but I will tell you it's definitely in Montana. And not just in Billings. We like to point towards Billings. Everything bad, it slants right to Billings, right? It's just, you drive through there, you can smell it. It smells bad. It's just, tell me it doesn't. I mean, my brother-in-law works in the refinery, said it smells like money, but it smells. And so, talking about human trafficking as it has to do with foster kids, I thought of no better title for this presentation than the word unbridled. And as you look at the statistics and you read the stories and you listen to the stories, you will understand what I mean. Traffickers have an unconstrained, unrestrained, uncontrolled, uninhibited, unrestricted access to our kids. We have made it absolutely possible with technology for anyone to have access to anyone else. And as much as we want to, as many protections as you want to throw on the phones, and you want to throw on there, on your Wi-Fi and the restrictions and the shut-off times and the turn-on times and all of those kinds of things, I want to tell you, you cannot completely seal a perpetrator or an exploiter out. They will find a way in. If they want access to your child, they will find that access. But it's not like we have to live in fear. It's just that we need to pay attention. We absolutely need to pay attention. Let me give you just a few numbers So we know that, and my assistant Bree put together some great statistics, and 60% of all human trafficking victims have a history of being in the foster system. That's a huge number. 60, that's over half of the victims that have been rescued will tell you, I am one time in my life went through the foster system. Now, let me be super clear. I am all about foster families. Those of you, I can't remember, I think it was last year I spoke here, maybe a year before. As I get older, it seems like time just kind of condenses. I shared with you about the fact that in my family, as I was growing up, we had 19 foster kids through our home, mostly babies. But and so please don't misunderstand me in any way. But I want to tell you that the foster system, as we know it, is a broken system. The scheme of it. Why? Because it was never intended. I want to tell you, you can read from the very beginning of Scripture until the very end. And nowhere in there does it excuse us, those that are believers, that is, from participating or being the lead in taking care of those that are orphaned or widowed. It's our responsibility. But we like to sit back, I like to sit back at times, and point the finger and talk about this broken system. Well, it's broken because we dropped the ball. And so as we look at the solutions, I think no one should take no one should take the lead more so than those that are believers and those that follow Jesus. So many foster children that we have worked with, and the statistics say many, and we'll say a lot. I can tell you that 100% of the victims that we have worked with for the Lifeguard Group over the last 10 years have had some sort of sexual abuse, sexual molestation, or sexual assault in their background. They're not going to come out and tell you that. They're not going to come out and admit that right up front, but somewhere down the line, it's going to be revealed. I can tell you that most oftentimes it gets revealed as they are sitting with their therapist and as they begin to allow themselves to open that part of their mind that they shut off, and that survival piece kicks in. We know that they can be recruited by family members, and I think one of the things that makes our foster kids the most vulnerable is that more relatable people have access to them. My kids, they grew up in my house. I was their main individual. My wife and I, we were their main disciplers, their main disciplinarians, their main mentors, their main models. When you have a foster kid that walks through the system, goes from a group home maybe to a foster home, and then to another foster home, maybe then to a respite home, then to another foster home, that many more people have access. And every home they go to, that group of uncles and aunts and that group of cousins and it makes them that much more vulnerable. It opens their scope that much farther. So I want to define for you what we're talking about when we talk about human trafficking. You may hear the definition of human trafficking come your way a lot of times, and what they will say is very simply this, where somebody is forced into a commercial sex act where they are induced by force, fraud, and coercion. Now, according to law enforcement, that is absolutely, those three things have to be proven to have a case against somebody to be a trafficker or be involved in human trafficking, one or the other. If they are a minor, you do not have to prove force, fraud, or coercion. But that is really the least important of the definition. What is the most important? The definition of human trafficking is that we need to understand it's the recruitment, the harboring, the transportation, the provision, and the obtaining of an individual or of a person for commercial sex. So here's what people don't understand a lot of times, is that whether you're selling an individual or whether you're buying an individual, you are guilty of being a sex trafficker. And we are getting more and more, not anywhere close to where it should be in the state of Montana. So understand, in the year 2000, nobody, by law or by statute, by written law, it was not illegal by written word to traffic a human being until the year 2000. That's when the Trafficking Victims Protection Act was brought into effect in Congress, and now just this year it was reauthorized again for the fourth time. And for whatever reason, every time it comes up for reauthorization, they want to have discussion on it. It just blows my mind. But so understand again that Montana, when the Trafficking Victims Protection Act came as federal, each state then has to adopt that into their constitution. Montana, unfortunately, was one of the last four to adopt the Trafficking Victims Protection Act into our constitution. So in Montana, we were actually listed as one of the faltering four. It was us, South Dakota, North Dakota, and Arkansas. And I've got some friends from Arkansas, and I always tell them, I said, well, at least we had shoes. And when we talk about these four things, is in Montana alone, so we have those laws on the book, but our laws right now have no teeth. And so I want to give just a little bit of a commercial. So if you have or know or are involved in any way with anybody that you have any kind of relationship with in the legislature, in the state legislature, you need to convince them that we need tougher laws and tougher penalties on those that are picked up and are convicted and prosecuted for human trafficking. For example, if you are caught purchasing an individual for sex in the state of Montana, your first offense is a misdemeanor. It's no different than what our DUI laws are. So it's not a felony until your fourth time. And so we're a little bit behind in Montana. In fact, if you get caught purchasing somebody for sex in Montana, it's a little stricter for children, but not that much. If you're caught picking or paying somebody for sex, for commercial sex, you're going to get a $100 fine, you're going to get a misdemeanor, and you're going to go home. We're trying to change those laws, trying to make that penalty much stiffer, trying to force those that are picked up and caught purchasing sex for them to go to what we would call John School or Sexual Deviant School, where they then go for a 10-week school to understand what sexual exploitation is all about. And really, sex exploitation and commercial sex is, it's a gender-based violence. The majority of our victims that we work with or that are in the United States today are female, and the majority of the perpetrators are male. It's just the fact. People get all upset. You can't separate genders. I'm just telling you what the stats say, and that's just the reality of all of it. So what are some trends that are taking place? Traffickers prey on anyone who is vulnerable. We will often say that trafficking is nothing more than the exploitation of vulnerabilities. A trafficker is looking for somebody with the crack. They're looking for the crack in their wall. They're just looking for something that makes them vulnerable, something that makes their voice pleasing to them. And we'll get a little into that just a little bit more. Trafficking is a form of modern-day slavery. In fact, as you look at history, we have more slaves on the face of the earth than at any other time in all of history. As we count the numbers, and statistics are important. If there's one individual being trafficked, then we should all stop and take care of it. But right now, we're looking at, in the United States alone, let's talk worldwide, we're looking at about 30 to 35 million individuals that are being bought and sold on a daily basis. As we bring things back into the United States, it's between 3 and 5 million. Now, I'm not talking about people that are brought into the United States from other countries. I'm talking about American, born in America, boys and girls, American citizenship, boys and girls that are being bought and sold. Out of that 3 to 5 million, 50% of those are children, and 75 to 85% of those are women. And so that gives you just a little bit of understanding. We're seeing trafficking that's related to the opioid epidemic. Now, in Missoula, you hear a lot about our opioid, especially in Montana, and how drugs are prominent, and as they're coming in. Trafficking is following the very same routes as drug traffickers. So human trafficking right now is the #2 criminal enterprise on the face of the earth, only behind drug trafficking. And most likely by the time this year comes to an end, human trafficking will be the #1 criminal enterprise in America. Why? Because why will it be more popular than drugs? people think, well, are drugs going to go away? Drugs aren't going to go away. But what's going to happen are these gangs, the cartel, pimps and traffickers are going to realize that as they travel and as they sell drugs and deal drugs, it makes sense for them fiscally, financially, for them to sell humans. And I know this sounds crass, but this is just their mindset and how they would think. So, for example, if I were to be a drug dealer and I wanted to, if I was selling pain pills, let's say, if I sold you 30 hydrocodone and I got my money, I would then have to take that money, go and find some more, reinvest that money, and try to come and make some more and try to buy and sell. But for a human being, I can sell that young girl over and over and over and over and over again, every night, night after night after night. And that's what makes human trafficking very lucrative. So we're seeing more and more cases in Montana of family-facilitated trafficking. You may hear about it as familial trafficking, where parents or family members with a substance abuse problem or an opioid issue or addiction, they sell their children. We were in Mississippi. We were doing a school assembly, and we do a school assembly that addresses human trafficking, but that's not what we were doing that day. We were just talking about self-esteem and following your dreams, and this young lady came up afterwards, and she seemed smaller than all the rest of the kids. I mean, she was tiny. And we were talking for a while, and she looked up at me and she said, "Mister, I really appreciate what you said today. That was really good." I said, "Oh, thank you so much. That's so kind." And, you know, even as an adult, it's so good to hear people say encouraging things, and it makes us want to keep going. And as I looked at her, I noticed that on her neck there was some discoloration that was there. Well, unfortunately, over the last 10 years, I've learned what to look for and the signs that are there. And part of me just said, you know what? If you act like you don't notice it, you can move on and go away. But you know that gripping thing that just doesn't allow you to do that? Well, it did that. And I said, "Hey, are you okay?" And she had this look that came over her immediately. She said, "Mister, don't say anything. Don't tell anybody." I said, "What are you talking about?" I said, are you safe at home? Is everything okay at home?" She said, "Mister, don't say anything because it'll take me away again." And she looked at me and she said, "Listen, mister, the hell I know is better than the hell I don't know." And I thought to myself, why would you even live in hell in the first place? I looked and I saw the bruising as it crossed across the midline of her neck, and I began to ask what had happened. In the questioning, I asked her the questions, "What's the best day of your entire life?" She goes, "Oh, I know what that day was." I said, "What day was that?" She says, "It was about 6 weeks ago." Well, I said, "What happened 6 weeks ago?" She said, "My mom went to jail." And I said, I asked, like, "What was your best day?" She goes, "No, that was my best day." And I said, "Well, what happened? What was going on?" And she said, "Well, it's a long story, but my mom, she sold me to the air conditioning repairman so that we could get our air conditioner fixed. But they caught her, and they put her in jail." And I thought to myself, well, that's a long time for a bruise to stick around for 6 weeks. She told me that she was staying at Grandpa and Grandma's house, and then later on it came out that Grandpa was not only selling her, but using her as well. And so somebody had too much access to this little girl, 11 years old, familial. This lady just wanted her air conditioner fixed. I'm like, sweat it out, lady. There are recruiters, juvenile recruiters that are in our middle schools and our high schools. They're working with pimps, and right now we know that the top three recruiting grounds for pimps and traffickers right now are middle school and high school and shopping malls. And I continue to tell my daughters, see, now sometimes I will use things, I will abuse my privilege of knowledge, and I have tried to convince my daughters that the mall is an evil place.
It is. Yes, it is. Yes.
There is nothing good that happens at the mall,
nope.
Except Red Robin. Just that one section is okay. Just that one area. And then, just because of the anointing of Red Robin, Dairy Queen is fine, too. But George Julius is Cafe Dolce is not bad, but I mean the mall's evil. Well,
We agree.
nobody's pointing the finger at any place or any school. I'm just telling you, these traffickers know where kids are, and they know how to find them. They know what to look for, and they don't. We're not talking that a pimp's going to walk into a school and start looking and recruiting. They have people that work with them. And we don't have time tonight to go through the entire process of how a trafficker would build his team or build his family. But you will notice that in a lot of terminology, you will notice that a pimp will use and will pervert all of the things that we talk about as healthy and right, like daddy, family, wife, love, commitment, and loyalty. They will talk about all of those things, but they're in such a perverted fashion. But when they hit the ears of a young girl, they're familiar. And deep down, it doesn't matter how a young lady's acting out, it doesn't matter what a young lady's doing, it doesn't matter how foul her mouth is. Deep down, she wants to have a daddy figure in her life. Deep down, she wants somebody to put boundaries out for her. Deep down, she wants to know what it is to be in a loving family. Deep down, she wants to be a loving wife someday. But the longer they are in the life or in this game, and the more these things are perverted, the more they are perverted in their minds, the less they will begin to understand, and the more time it takes to bring them through that therapeutic piece. Anywhere where a trafficker thinks that he or she might be, where there might be a demand for commercial sex, is where you will find human traffickers. I can tell you in Missoula, I can't give you specific numbers, I don't have that presentation with me, but our number one times of human trafficking here in the United States, or in Missoula, is over Cat Grizz weekend, homecoming weekend, parents weekend, and basically our high month is probably August. It's our height of tourists, and June. In South Dakota, anybody have a guess of when South Dakota might be the highest? Sturgis is one, but there's one that's actually higher. Bird hunting season in South Dakota is actually unbelievable. And we have not yet worked that because it's so vast and uncontrollable. Are there any, do you have any questions at this point? Am I just depressing you like completely? Yes, ma'am.
Yes, you are. But
Yeah, well, thank you.
I love the information, though. I think it's very good to get. You talked a lot about girl trafficking, but we have 2 boys,
Yeah.
and I'm worried about them, too.
Yeah, and we are seeing a rise in trafficking of young boys. So when human trafficking began, back in the 1800s, we have a book that actually is titled, it's a Christian book, it was given to churches, and the title is How to Stop the Trafficking of Our Women. And it was a book that pastors were reading and trying to understand back in the I want to say it was 1865 when that book was published. And so that when we started learning about trafficking and the exploitation and prostitution, it was women. And then it moved to young girls as time came closer to where we are today. And then it went to young boys. And what is happening today, and again, this is a whole other avenue of the issue of what the major fuel that fires this epidemic is pornography. And as pornography goes, so goes trafficking. They will follow the same graph line. And human trafficking, we will know, we're trying to set up studies and we're trying to set up computer to try and to gain more knowledge of what kids are, what type of pornography they're looking at. I hate to say that. I wish we could just say how we could stop it. But the fact is we need to know what kinds of pornography kids are watching, because that's if we can know that, we could then get a jump on what's taking place in the trafficking world. So for example, when we were in San Francisco in the year, I want to say 4 years ago, we were working the Super Bowl in San Francisco. I think it was 4 years ago. We were, and then the year before that in New Jersey, we saw a huge rise in the trafficking of disabled and special needs kids. And in the pornography world, they use the word fetish, and that's the searches that they do. And so to understand that human psyche, that perversion is where it takes our kids. So I hope it's no surprise to you that our kids are at risk.
When I first got trafficked. My home life was very violent because of the things that I've been through in my life, being sexually molested at a young age, having a family member not believe me when I told them that it happened by the hands of a family member. I felt that no one was there to protect me and no one cared or loved me. When I was 12 years old, I was a runaway. I was just walking around in the streets and a guy pulled up on the side of me and asked me if I was okay. I told him I was fine, and I started to walk away, and it started to rain. He was like, well, just come sit in the car with me until the rain stops. It was cold and wet, so I agreed. I was basically kidnapped and raped and beaten, sold for days. So from that moment on, I just stayed in the streets. I couldn't imagine myself getting out of that situation. I felt worthless. I had little to no self-esteem. I would literally work early in the morning and I would see kids my age going to school. And it was hard for me to look at those kids because there was a lot of shame. The one way that I was able to get a break from the life was to basically go into a store and steal in plain sight while my pimp was outside in the car. If I was caught stealing, I would eventually get arrested and I would go to juvenile hall. For most girls or most kids, they would see it as a punishment, but it was structure in my life. It was a safe place and I knew that no one will be able to harm me. My life basically changed once I was beaten by my pimp. And I was in a hospital for a short stint of time, and I knew that this was my way out. I was turning 18 and there was no more safety net. So if I was to get in trouble, if I was to steal to get away from a pimp, I was going to the county, and that was a whole nother world that I did not want to be a part of. So I took that opportunity to leave California in hopes of leaving the life. I realized that I was a victim, and then I became a survivor, and now I am a warrior. What I would tell the 12-year-old me, I would tell the 12-year-old me that it's going to get better. I would tell her that your life may seem like it's being sacrificed right now, but it's going to help so many other women. So just keep on going.
So something stuck out in your mind from this video. What was it? Might be just a line. What's one thing that stuck out?
Warrior.
She's a lawyer. Anything else?
Survivor.
Yeah. What was her main vulnerability?
Her age.
Age? What else?
Her living situation.
Yep. What? Say
I was
it.
just going to say her living situation and the fact that she spoke up and no one believed her.
Yeah. Yeah. Anything else? What else was there? There's her main. All of those things were like tapestry on this main, very simple vulnerability that this pimp took advantage of in that moment.
Low self-esteem.
Runaway. Well, she was homeless and cold in the rain and alone.
If you caught her words, she said, the pimp said, get in. She said, no, I'm fine. He said, why not just get in? It's raining. And she said these words, I was cold and I was wet, so I thought, why not? Simple vulnerability. As much as I hate throwing any kind of compliment G's on the side of a pimp. He knew exactly the words to say to bring her in. She was cold and she was wet. What did it make her feel like when she saw people her age?
Ashamed.
Shame.
Do you think that was something that came out of who she was?
No.
Or something that somebody built into her?
It was built
It
in.
became, the more time that she began to spend with this pimp, the deeper that he would get his claws into her and get herself, that no longer did he need to, if there was ever a time where he had to physically restrain her, it didn't have to happen anymore. Because now he could just say, you know what, Tika, go ahead and run. You think someone wants a filthy young black girl like you that you've slept with how many men? Is that, you think that's what they want? Go ahead. I'm the only one that cares for you, Tika. I'm the only one. I know that I might give you a beat down every once in a while, but it's because I care. And again, it touches on that familiar thing that she had heard before. You can run, Tika, but Daddy is the only one that cares for you. And your family, if you lose that loyalty with them, you're going to lose everything that we have built for you. She said the place that she found the most comfort was when she went to jail. Now, I don't know if you've ever been to the Missoula County Detention Facility. Compared to the jails in Montana, it's a pretty nice jail, but I find no comfort there. I find no solace there. I don't ever want to be on the other side of the doors when they close. When I walk through that jail, visiting, working with the men and women that work there, every time those doors close, just that sound, it gives me just this eerie feeling. And I think, oh my God. And I've always had this fear of going to jail. And I've been a bad guy. I guess my dad put some fear in me. So I want to hit this quick with you, and then we're going to be done and we're going to run out of time. So are you familiar with Maslow's hierarchy of needs? So those that are super good at psychology, I loved psychology apparently in college because I took it 3 times, and they just couldn't give me up. Just loved it year after year, quarter after quarter, just couldn't get enough of it. And so this is Maslow's hierarchy of needs, simply stating that once, for us to reach the plateau or to reach the pinnacle of our life, and that is to realize who we are, what were we created for, and what can we accomplish in life. This is who I am, and this is what I can do. We can't just get there. We've got to climb this pyramid. We've got to have these physiological needs met. We've got to have the needs of safety and security that are met. Well, I want to tell you, in the life of a young kid, if a pimp, now, I've confessed this too many times, I think, and I've said this, I remember the first time I said this to my wife, I said, you know, as I watch kids now, as I watch them in different scenarios in life, and you can see them in different places, whether it's Sturgis, whether it's the Super Bowl, whether it's the Final Four, whatever it is, you can watch a kid, you can see, oh my gosh, you could, and I've said to my wife, I'd be a fabulous trafficker, because just of what I've learned over time, and this is what traffickers understand. And the sad part is that most traffickers understand this about their victims than that victim's parents understood this about them. So, if a pimp, well, first let's look at this. This is Antoine Thurmond. He was a pimp in New Jersey. And this was his quote. He said, "My job is to make sure she has what she needs, whether it's personal hygiene, get her nails done, take her to buy an outfit, take her out to eat, and make her feel wanted, but I keep the money." He understood this. Listen, these kids are in a hard place in life. As they look at this, when somebody talks about what you can become and the incredible things that you can do and the awesome things that are out there for you and all the opportunities, a kid that is in that place in life, Tika, as she walked those streets, Tika could not see this. But what grabbed Tika was, I can provide these 3 things, and I can make this available to you. He provided this. Antoine knew that if he just provided these and hung those things out like a carrot, that girl would never leave. So if a pimp were to rewrite Maslow's hierarchy of needs, I think this is how he would interpret it and maybe how he would do it. He's going to provide them some food. He's going to have shelter, etc. to a youth that's never had those things, to a youth that's on the street. We know that kids that are homeless, kids that are couch surfing, they're vulnerable. In Missoula, we have, I don't know what the word is, epidemic, I don't know what it is, but survival sex is through the roof in this town. At First Step here in town, where girls go to have checkups, where girls go that have been sexually assaulted, 25 times a week we'll hear of a young girl that had survival sex. And so we're trying to understand, but there again, the perpetrators convinced them that you did this, you asked for this, you wanted this. So they're going to provide those things. Just imagine a girl like Tika. Imagine a young girl here in Missoula tonight. She's going to be cold, she's going to be wet, she's going to be hungry. You know what a Big Mac, quarter pounder, you know what a Subway sandwich would do for a young girl? It's going to get her in your car. Bottom line. It's going to meet those physiological needs, just plain and simple. But again, he's going to pervert them. He's going to provide that safety and security. He's going to offer that protection against somebody that might hurt them. Now, understand, he may beat her to a pulp, may absolutely bruise her from bottom of her feet to the top of her head, but he will say these words, girl, no one's ever going to lay a hand on you. Daddy will watch you. Daddy will take care of you. And somehow, in that broken psyche, that young girl finds solace in that. It's a promise of protection or even financial security for that young girl. And it's not really financial security because every dime that she makes, she hands over every single night to that pimp when she gets back home. She's going to provide, or he's going to provide that love and belonging. Now listen, all they got to do, this is their understanding, all they got to do is spend a little time, participate in their favorite activities, and be present and engaged in their lives, and I got it. I take offense to that as a dad. Nothing would break my heart more than if I heard my kids say something to the effect of, hey Dad, thanks for coming to my game, but you know what's even better than that is when so-and-so comes, when so-and-so's there, or something like that. I don't want anybody to take this place for me. That's mine. But we've got young women and young boys that are desperate for that, and they will take it any way they can. Self-esteem. All they have to do is listen. There again, it's a perverted piece. I'm going to buy them a few expensive pieces of jewelry. I'm going to buy them an Abercrombie or an H&M shirt, and they're going to feel amazing. You know why? It's not from Goodwill. It's not something that got found. It's not a hand-me-down. And then he looks at her and he says, oh, girl, you look really good in that shirt. If I could tell you the number of times that we have worked with victims who simply were lured in by a man buying her an outfit, a dress, new shoes, and convincing her, you know what? You could be a model. In fact, he'll even let him go home and he'll say, listen, at such and such hotel, we're going to be taking headshots. You just come back and you bring a suitcase, and that way you can have a change of clothes. And you see, that way when he takes her, he doesn't have to provide her with buy her any new clothes. So we try to help young girls. Listen, modeling agents don't take headshots in a Super 8. It doesn't happen that way. And they don't advertise by handing out a little piece of paper. It's much more professional than that. But to understand from the psyche of somebody that's broken and so desperate that they will take that. I do, in my school assembly presentation, I have one simple piece where I talk about acceptance and I talk about the desire for love. And in that moment, I stop and I said, I have 3 daughters. And I don't stand up here with any kind of authority in front of you as a student, but I have 3 daughters at home. And I'm not the greatest dad in the world. I try my very best. But I know one thing that my daughters need to hear from me somehow, some way, every single day, these 3 words. You're beautiful, you're precious, and you're worthy to be loved. And then I say, I would bet that there's some of you in this room today that have never heard those words. And I'm sorry. And if you've never heard those words, I'll say, let me be the first one. And I'll walk up to a young lady, and I'll look her in the eyes, and I'll say, you're beautiful. You're precious, and you're worthy to be loved. And you know what? They're not going to do it in front of the school assembly, but if they could, they'd reach their arms up and embrace me. And if you could stand behind me without them seeing you, you could look across from the left to the right of those bleachers and you could pick out all the girls that were desperate to hear it. I mean, you could see it on their face. It's just a simple word. I tell dads all the time, listen, tell your daughters that they're beautiful. Tell them you love them, because if you don't, somebody will. I'm going to tell you, somebody will, and it will be in a perverted fashion. Self-actualization, or that place where they've understood who they are. Again, it's perverted. Promises fulfilled, their dreams reached. Girl, you have reached the pinnacle. Look at the shoes you're wearing. You're carrying a Gucci purse, and you're wearing all these fancy clothes. Tell me, did you have that before Daddy picked you up? No, you didn't. So now get in the car, and let's go. We had a young girl from Missoula. So Friday, before Christmas Eve, we received a call from my mom. She said, I think my daughter's being trafficked. And I said, well, where? And I was getting ready to head downtown. She said, no, I think she's in Phoenix. Well, we began to work, and we began to get our team and send our team out. And sure enough, we found her in Phoenix. 20 years old. Beautiful young lady. Actually had a very short stint as a model, as a legitimate model. And please, nobody go and tell Super 8 that I said that they don't take model shots. But they don't. They don't. If they do, they're not the model shots you want. So we found this young girl, and on Christmas Eve, the day before Christmas Eve, we flew her home. And it was a pretty incredible experience in that airport when she came through that revolving door, and Mom was standing there, and she began to scream. The daughter screamed, and her friends screamed. They embraced and they cried, and they held one another, and they wept. And that next morning, Christmas Eve day, she came in. We took her into the sheriff's office, and they interviewed her, and we heard her story. And, we took her to first step, where they gave her a pregnancy test, where they checked her for STDs and all of those things. And I can tell you that the bruising that they found there, they usually have a diagram. It's just a diagram of a person, and they will just write where bruises are so that law enforcement can use that. There were so many bruises that they had to draw lines outside away from the body so that they could at least feel. They were over 50-some bruises on this little girl's body. She told her story. We plugged her in with the therapist, and she was starting that process. And a week ago, this coming Saturday, I got a call from an individual who said, I think Jamalette has left. And sure enough, she was back in Dallas. And why? Because somebody told her that they could help fulfill the promises that she'd always dreamed of. And the perversion and the misunderstanding. So I'm just going to throw these up quickly for you. This is the 5 reasons that foster youth are vulnerable victims of human trafficking. Number one, it's just simply because of the neglect and abuse that they've already dealt with in their life. They've really become to believe that that's just their place in life. And so to be picked up by a trafficker, at least he's buying her expensive things, or he's, taking her somewhere she's traveling. They've already normalized the fact that they've been used for financial gain. Somehow somebody said to them, maybe a foster parent at some point said, you know what, they don't pay me enough for you to be here. Or maybe they said something to the fact of, we need more money, you're expensive. And in that mind game that they're already playing, their interpretation comes out as, well, what's this different than everybody else that's bought me down the line? They've already got the fractured safety net. There's nobody else around them. You know what? They go missing, and no one cares. No one looks. And that's why I say, we talk about the missing Native and Indigenous women in Montana, and we are right now, we are on 2 searches active for missing Native girls. But nobody wants to talk about foster kids that go missing. And where are they recorded? Where are they listed? Where are we paying attention to them? They have a deep longing for family. And again, it may be a perverted family, but it is a family. Tammy worked with a young girl. I don't know, it was 6 or 7 times she kept going back to her pimp. And I was getting tired of it, to be honest with you. I just being straight up vulnerable. I was just done. And I said, you know what, next time she goes back, we're not going to help. And Tammy's like, oh, we are. Yeah, we are. Like, I know, but I needed to say that out loud. And, you know, sometimes you just got to let your man just say it out loud and just, you know what. So anyways, Tammy had the opportunity to ask her, why? Why do you keep going back? This girl looked Tammy in the eye. She goes, well, it may sound weird to you, but every night before we go work, so they're not gonna say I go prostitute. I'm not going to say I go have sex. Every night before I go to work, Daddy sits us down as a family and we have dinner together as a family. And then we clean up the dishes together and we go in and we wash the dishes and we put them all away and we sit back around the table and as a family we read the Bible and we have devotions together. And she looked at Tammy and she said, I've never had that in my life. So whatever I have to face for the rest of that night, that's all worth it for those 2 to 2.5 hours that I get to spend with my family. Perverted? Absolutely. Longing, desperate for someone to just love them and care for them. I hate that society makes it difficult for you to be a foster parent. I hate that as a man, that when you have a young lady in your home, I hate the fact that you have to think twice before when she comes in the door, you can't embrace her and that you can't just hold her and go, you are so absolutely beautiful and loved and cared for. I hate that society has limited what we can do. But I will not let society stop me from doing what my purpose is on the face of this earth. And I hope that you don't as well. And I want to say thank you on behalf of all those foster kids. My mom has kept in touch. My mom is 85 years old, and she still gets letters from some of those kids that were newborns in our home, and that's her greatest joy. And so thank you for what you do. You are absolutely incredible. I was going to put my information up there. If you look us up online, thelifeguardgroup.org, we would be happy to help you in any way. If you are struggling with any of the kids that come to your home or you see maybe some red flags, give us a call. We'll help you in any way. Yes, ma'am.
Question and a comment. Comment first. I know that in this community in the last 7 days, a freshman girl ran from a group home and had a ticket from a drug trafficker from many states away within 24 hours. 24 hours. And you want to talk about as locked up as you can get. Those kids in group homes don't have cell phones.
Right.
And they get dropped off at the door of my school. And they get picked up at 3 o'clock. And they're supervised and they're at the Y and they're, like 24/7. And if group homes can't keep kids safe without all of the electronic, like how in the world can we, when I think we're actively criticized regularly, at least within my own circles, about kids having access to electronics, like we shut our kids down big time. And then my question is, what do you think the average number of returns are?
The average number of times that a traffic victim returns to her trafficker or to her exploiter is 7 times.
7 to 25.
Yeah. And so there's a statistic that is out there, and it's as best as it's not like pimps are reporting or but within the first 48 hours. So for us, a missing kid is a vulnerable kid. Within the first 48 hours that a kid goes missing, they are the most vulnerable. Within those first 48 hours, 85 to 90% of those within the first 48 hours are approached by a pimp or a trafficker within those first 48 hours. I want to tell you, they have eyes on the street. And it doesn't have to be the pimp. Pimps employ what they would call a bottom individual and a bottom woman. They don't call them women, they call them hottie dames. But they work, and they think that they've worked themselves to the top, but it's actually the bottom. Yeah.
So I'm then going to be critical because I've been doing this for 20 years. And my attempts to show up at the city desk and turn a kid in as a runaway is consistently undermined.
Yep.
And consistently negatively affected back upon me and my processes and the inability to then show a united front.
Mm-hmm.
Again, years of showing up at that door and being told, well, what did you do? Did you tell her she had to come home? Right? Like that's what the cop says to me.
Yeah.
I've had cops show up at my door when I've called to say she showed up, she's been missing for 48 hours, somebody needs to come do an investigation to figure out where she's been. And I've had cops tell me to leave my own house so that they can visit with her inside, right? Like this sense that we become somehow the bad guy when all I'm trying to do is keep kids safe.
We just, in fact, my days were a little crazy. We've gone through a weird season here. Yesterday, we had this exact conversation that I had it with the sheriff here in Missoula County, T.J. McDermott, said, we must change our process. When you call in a runaway, this is what happens. They are listed as a runaway. There might be an ATL that is put out. If there's a picture available, they may put that. If time goes long enough, they may enter that child in NCIC, but they don't go look. And we need to change that process. Now, let me give you a little of that other side. For example, Missoula County Sheriff. Right now, in Missoula County, you have 6 deputies that are patrolling 2,500 square miles. So when it comes, there's a misconception that when you report your kid missing, that people are going to go and, the cops are going to look for your kid.
Right.
Well, they're not. That's where we felt like that's really what started the Lifeguard Group, is so many of the kids that we had dealt with, or the women, had started this life because they were a runaway, and no one cared here, so why are they going to care here? And so we actually just finished a grant. We're looking to begin to put together a team, so when that happens, we can provide what law enforcement can't provide. Not because they don't want to, they just can't. Now, I'm not going to let them all off the hook, because some of them, well, this is their 5th time, 6th time. I'm like, I don't care if it's their 100th time.
Right.
Somebody's got to go look for them.
Yeah, it's frustrating.
Yeah.
And the ability to sort of call and say, I can see her in the park.
Yeah.
And I know that if I walk up to her, she will take off in the car with her friends. Someone else needs to come tell her. And they will say, you have to approach her, and you have to tell her to get in the car. And that is just a flawed system.
Yeah, I agree. Yes, sir.
I have a shout out though for Missoula. I don't know if it's the sheriff's department or the city cops. A friend of ours had her daughter's email open and saw that she had gotten a ticket to Dallas from an unknown sender, and they called the called the cops. The cops found out when the plane ticket was, what time it was for. They met the parents there at the airport before she ever got there. They had her picked up.
Nice.
When they went back and looked at where the ticket came from, they said had she gotten on that plane, they would never see her again. And this young lady was 18 or 19 and quite large.
Yeah.
And she was being trafficked.
Yeah. There's no people go, what's the typical kid that's being trafficked? What's the typical person? There is none.
Mm-mm.
They are all colors, they are all sizes, they are all socioeconomic backgrounds. It's whosoever will come. I mean, that's what makes it super difficult, Yes, sir.
I just want to comment on one of the things about them returning, constantly going back to that, is the same thing as there wasn't very many fences around plantations.
Mm-hmm.
Once you've broken somebody's will and once you've psychologically reprogrammed,
Yep.
I've met girls like that my whole life.
Yeah.
That they will just go back. They could be away for a year or 2 years, but there's something in the back of their brain that clicks, that wants to go back to that person who enslaved, who reprogrammed their brain. They get brainwashed on a level that is slavery. I mean, it's pure slavery. That's the best term for it.
Well,
It's
absolutely.
slavery.
Well, we've just put in a grant to build a safe house here in Missoula County for trafficking victims. And one of the things that we know that we must provide, people will say, why don't you just put them in domestic shelter violence? Why don't you just put them in a teen challenge? And all those places are great. But what these young girls, and that's what our home will be for young girls, the trauma bonding that takes place, we don't understand. In fact, I see Tricia nod her head because we had this conversation a year ago on the depth of that trauma bond I would love to stand up here and talk about how I understand that and how I get that. I don't. It makes me angry. It frustrates me. It makes those victims hard to work with. They are the hardest people to work with. It's just across the board. I'm getting the hook. So
You can feel it.
yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for letting us be here.